Congressum faciemus. 16 years of Jesuit education, and I've retained 2 words of Latin. Those were they. I'm John Holowitz, Vice President for Academics at Fordham, and it's a great honor for me to be able to introduce Dr. Levinson to you this evening. On behalf of Father McShane, who is out of town this week, University's president, welcome to Fordham University. We're delighted to have you in this marvelous event on the campus. I was thinking this morning about why it is that I'm so pleased to be able to introduce Dr. Paul Levinson for tonight's keynote address, a talk on the flouting of the First Amendment, an issue of considerable moment in our public lives in the United States and indeed in the world. And the great pleasure I take from this opportunity comes from 4 or 5 different things. First, Dr. Levinson is a teacher of distinction at Fordham and the head of our largest undergraduate unit as chair of Department of Communication and Media Studies. Dr. Levinson has indeed crossed to the dark side and has entered the world of administration with great integrity, vision, and leadership. My pleasure also comes from the fact that Dr. Levinson is a scholar of renown. His books include Cell Phone, the Story of the World's Most Mobile Medium, Real Space, Digital McLuhan, The Soft Edge, A Natural History and Future of the Information Revolution. It's true, too, that his work has been translated into Chinese, Japanese, and 6 other languages. And it's true that he's a renowned author of fiction, including among his works The Silk Code, Borrowed Tides, The Consciousness Plague, The Pixel Eye. It's true that he appears regularly on Fox, CBS, ABC, MSNBC, CNN, CBC, CNBC, NPR, the BBC, the CBC, I think I may have said that twice, and is regularly quoted in the nation's leading newspapers. And in a moment which is preserved in Fordham lore, and more importantly on digital medium in Fordham's library, may be the only person in the country to have gotten the last word and a laugh on the O'Reilly factor in one of its most memorable episodes. All of these contribute to my great pleasure in introducing Dr. Levinson to you this evening, but they're not the entire reason I'm happy and proud. I must reveal to you that in addition to all of these other accomplishments, Dr. Levinson is a genuine rock and roll celebrity. You perhaps doubt me when I say this, but as it happens, I have the proof, one of the proofs, one of his CDs, one that he produced himself back in the 1970s, tunes of some note, many of which have been reissued and have gained him, and through him, Fordham University, renown for accomplishment on yet another front. Not content with being a teacher of distinction, a performer, a scholar, a gifted artist, an intellectual of the first order, Paul Levinson is, for many of us, an inspiration and a friend, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce him to you and you to him this evening. Paul?
Well, thank you, John. And apropos your comment about the dark side, I knew there was still good news someplace. Well, I was driving down to the convention today, and I realized I was driving about 62 or 63 miles an hour on the West Side Drive, and as some of you may know, the speed limit there is 50 miles an hour. So I hope there are no police officers in the audience. And actually, it's a good thing that there weren't any police officers or in cars or on motorcycles or anywhere near where I was this afternoon, because if they had seen me driving even a few miles too fast, they could have pulled me over and given me a summons. And the way traffic courts work, at least in New York City, I think you're guilty until proven innocent. But you might wonder, what does this have to do with the First Amendment? Well, it struck me as an interesting irony that a person who drives just a few miles over the posted speed limit can be found guilty and pay a hefty fine, but that our government, when it systematically violates the supreme law of the land, which is what our Constitution is, when the FCC, for example, fines television networks and radio stations over $7 million, which is what they did last year, even though the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech or of the press, it strikes me as ironic that the federal government can and does do that with impunity all the time. And so that's what I want to explore with you in a little more detail this evening. Now, actually, if I had a couple of months, we could explore other ways in which the federal government systematically violates the supreme law of the land. For example, there's a provision in the Constitution that governs declarations of war. And yet, World War II was the last time that our country went to war with a declaration of war by joint session of Congress as called for in the Constitution. Or I could talk to you about double jeopardy, which is also prohibited in the Constitution, and yet people who are found not guilty in criminal court are often retried in civil court. And it doesn't matter, I think, that OJ is one of those, because it doesn't matter whether the people are in fact guilty or innocent. I think what matters is that the government is violating the law. But tonight, let's just look at the First Amendment. And let's begin on page 1 in our country. This would be back in the 1780s, a few years after the successful revolution. And there were two schools of thought back then about what the relationship between government and what we would today call media, what was then just called the press, should be. One school of thought was presented by John Adams, and I think Neil Postman would have liked John Adams. I don't know if in fact he did, I never talked to him about that, but John Adams was certainly no fan of the media. Actually, John Adams was no fan of people. He distrusted people. The time that he spent in France traumatized him and led him to believe that if people are unchecked, if people are not controlled, then their animalistic instincts will come to the fore, and what happened in France with blood running in the streets and heads rolling and all those terrible things would happen right here in the United States. So John Adams wanted the press to support a strong central government. The other point of view was one that Thomas Jefferson presented. This was a point of view that actually didn't originate with Jefferson. John Milton, a few centuries earlier, had said that truth and falsity should battle it out in the public arena and let the people decide which is the better presentation. And according to Jefferson and his colleagues James Monroe and James Madison, what you therefore needed was a strong press that was a watchdog on the central government.